question that I might have prepared, but I think after seeing your presentation, you know, very inspirational. I'd like to know, in your kind of experience or thoughts, talking about what the adjacent possibility may be, when do you think we might be talking about things like the living building challenge as being something that's not just the very few doing, but becomes maybe the norm, not just here but anywhere? When is that horizon going to be upon us? I think I know what your answer is, but
as soon as possible, please. Yeah.
As soon as we all start doing something about it.
Yeah. Look, I wish I had brushed up on my statistics before today to help answer your question, but on the Living Building Challenge's website, there's a map, a world map that shows the number of projects that are currently pursuing the Living Building Challenge. And what's really, really beautiful is this tool only arrived in the universe sort of about 10 years ago. And the exponential trajectory of projects taking it up is probably the thing that makes me the happiest about the whole thing. We have, there's a few projects in Australia that have already done it. So there's the Sustainable Buildings Research Center in Wollongong. And we, sorry, I should probably also say that I'm on the board of directors of the Living Future Institute of Australia, so I'm not completely unbiased here. But we did a design competition, which is part of how Fraser's property decided to go for the Living Building Challenge. And I had one of the architects who participated in the challenge come up to me at the exhibition of all of the schemes and say, we didn't win the competition, but this project has changed my life. Just doing this work, just using this framework has changed the way I think about my job. And I still get goosebumps when I think about him coming up and telling me that. So I guess the more that we can talk about this tool and the more we can engage people in these kind of conversations and ask these kind of questions, the faster we'll get the uptake. So I unfortunately don't have a crystal ball that could set a date, but I think what's really encouraging, I'll finish up by saying that there's many different building types that are taking this on. So there are no limits to where it can be applied, I would say.
Can I add a comment? Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Usually the building a little smaller because I think the difficulty there, net zero water is not something that is easy to do. Even Bowler Center, after it was occupied, the city won't allow them to drink the water because how do you prove the water is clean? So for a while they have to go through the legality of things. And the other thing is the material, right? Yeah, I mean no red listed material. Some of this stuff, you know, from a design point of view, when we specify material, sometimes you have to take on the liability of you have to now know the content of the material. So those are some of the hurdles to overcome.
I have a quick question. You mentioned this concept of biophilia, and I think everyone agrees that humans and buildings love to have plants and trees around them, but maybe buildings themselves and the materials we use aren't biophilic, like the humidity, the challenges of keeping plants alive in buildings. Could the three of you maybe comment on the challenges of actually integrating greenery indoors into kind of current building systems and some of the challenges that presents?
I guess I can do that. It's about the senses, right? So if you have green plants, it's about what you see, about hearing the rattling of the leaves, about touching the microbial of the plants that otherwise you won't touch. As you probably know, actually the kids grow up from the farm, they are healthier and chances are they need less glasses because they see far away things as they grow up. But having said that, we also know that from science now, any living being is a function of the environment. You are what your environment is, no matter you are animals or plants. Now you take an animal indoor, it's not the same animal as the one live in the wild. If you took a plant indoor, it's not the same plant as the one in the wild. And also the plant itself, they will also generate methane, VOC, and other contaminants. So this process has to be careful on the type of the plant you bring indoor, how are they bring indoor. If you have a lot of air blow on a plant, for example, you actually will re-emit the PM10 and the PM2.5, the plant absorb back into the air. So this is a, we need more science about it, but we start knowing more about what type of plant we can bring indoor and how do we bring it indoor. And it's not just gonna be, okay, let's just bring everything indoor. And so we have to be a little bit more thoughtful about that process.
Yeah, I'd add that there's been some research done to talk about, in particular, indoor plants that do a better job of absorbing the kind of indoor pollutants that we have in office environments. But even stepping back from that, if we're creating environments that plants don't survive particularly well in, I think that's kind of a hint. So yeah, I mean, you know, like in this room here, it'd be nice to have the ability to open the windows. You know, so to me, biophilia is about the response that happens in your brain when you are presented with natural patterns. So that kind of fractal sort of thing is what your brain is responding to. And there's a whole new branch of science around this particular response called neurobiophilia that you might want to look into some more as well. But rather than imitating natural patterns, the more we can incorporate genuine connection with the outdoors, that's really the thing to aspire to.
I mean, adding to that, as you know, the daylight, the color of the sunlight can go up to 100,000 degrees. Typical white light is about 5,000, 6,000. We cannot even mimic that sort of lighting level using artificial light. So there's something about nature that, and it's obviously free. So from the circadian cycle to all that stuff, I think we're just scratching the surface of how we can be healthier. For example, the latest stuff we find is red color actually diminishes the daytime circadian rhythm. So if you, if you have a kids and you want them to sleep well, painting the whole room red is probably not a good idea in the kids' bedroom.
I might just follow on from that last question. I think the speakers all did an excellent job this afternoon of highlighting some of the benefits and barriers to these green initiatives and what an important role we all have to play in implementing further green initiatives as we move forward. Here in Sydney, the City of Sydney has a green roof and wall policy as part of the 2030 plan, which outlines some objectives to support installation of quality green roofs and vertical treatments. And some of the, initiatives highlighted are leadership, education, research, which really address barriers to cost and maintenance of green roofs and walls. So I'd be interested to hear from the speakers, if you had a magic wand, what do you believe is the most important initiative to encourage more uptake of green roofs and walls in tall buildings?
I think there's an important balance that we have to have there when we're looking at vegetative roof designs of what would be the most efficient and actually best for that environment. You know, I mentioned stormwater, for example. You know, what's that best mixture of vegetation systems that are going to address that and ease the dependence on additional systems to provide around that building and to move that groundwater to other areas where you don't need that, or offset the amount of carbon dioxide is a huge benefit to it. So I think there's a lot of good mixtures that we could have with it, but a lot of it depends on, you know, how we're growing that vegetation. I think Australia is out in the right direction with it. They have a couple of good guides that should hopefully get to the goal of, what was it, 2025 here?
2030.
2030, yeah. To accomplish that. So I think definitely worthwhile trying to stay connected with our research. Hopefully we can move forward and look into what Australia is planning.
Mary, you mentioned briefly a project you worked on in Adelaide where I believe the City of Adelaide or local government of Adelaide was open to putting out an incentive and saying, yes, you can develop actually more than what we usually allow due to your green credentials. Is that something you've come across again, or is that just a one-off situation? And if it is a one-off situation or a very rare situation, is that something you're working on? Are you talking to the City of Sydney? Are you talking to the City of Melbourne? You know, how can what you're promoting be incentivized throughout the planning process, for example?
Okay. It was a very rare thing, and it was a very it was a rare and wonderful thing because it was representatives from the utilities at the state level and the sort of city people at the for the sort of civic level. And thank you for giving me the sort of kick up the butt that I should be talking to other cities about how to do things like that. At the moment, what I try to do is make my clients aware that this level of performance exists. I have found over the course of my career that I can get all head up about something and be really passionate and excited and go, do it like this, do it like this. And if there's no appetite for that, it doesn't get very far. So I rather prefer to invite them into a conversation about what would you like this building to achieve, and then kind of make them aware. If they say things like world's best practice, I go, okay, well, this is what world's best practice looks like. And sort of breadcrumb the conversation rather than sort of smash them over the head. But yeah, I'll thank you. I'll take that on board. If you have any suggestions on people I should speak to, let me know.
I'll share something, my own experience. I'm from the Philippines. I'm Jun Paula Fox. I'm an architect environmental planner. 2009, I gave up $1 million in architect's fee because the developers suspiciously got an approval to destroy the urban forest of Subic, 366 70-year-old trees. I gave up the $1 million. I got libel cases about $1 million as well. And after that, it's like a crusade already. The master plan communities that we do, I put in the deed restrictions. Every car you own, you must plant 10 trees. And they're following it. Except one lawyer who said he'll plant 40 trees, but he wants me to give him 4 cars. But anyway, it's an anecdotal research. I might need your help to affirm 10 cars per, 10 trees for every car you own. And we designated open spaces. So if your property is not big enough, you can plant it in the open spaces. And I was doing some calculations like, cities like Dubai, I used to work also, they should have 20 trees per car because they have much larger shopping utility vehicles. And nice presentation, thank you very much. Affirm what I've been crusading in my country. Thank you. Any standards you can set for codes and covenants and restrictions?
I suppose when people create equations like that, they're usually based on the emissions of an average type of vehicle and the sequestration capability of a typical tree. So they are inaccurate to some extent because different ages of trees and different species of trees have different carbon sequestration capability, and different kinds of cars have different emissions. So they must be doing some sort of averaging, I would guess.
But if it's about car emission, in US, GM has come out and declared all electric vehicle future, so the emission may be hopefully a thing of the past.
I couldn't stop noticing that all the information in guides or in research papers and also the examples you talked about are all related to temperate or semi-temperate locations. The world's population in 2050, more than half of it will live in tropical cities. So the question and also an invitation for curiosity for everyone here, I think, is do you know of research done about greening tropical cities, if there exists, And if not, I think the invitation is that we really have to think about that, because that's where most of the people of the world will live, and that's where we have to address it first. And we have time for it to do it, and also in the tropic everything goes very fast, so it's easy to do and prove. So again, really good presentation, but if you know of some research, I would be happy to hear about it.
Yeah, I think that the only one that I think that we're looking at, we're hopeful to try to get some information, was Singapore, which is somewhere around the same type of longitude that Costa Rica is in. And it's very, very humid. Vegetation does grow very fast there, and there are several buildings that do have vegetation on them. So that's something you know, again, it might be. I think some of the peer review had comment on that. You know, how do you maintain? Is there a maintenance? Is there a smart building sensor that could be there to make sure that you're selling? You know, these shrubs, these trees need proper maintenance so that you avoid any type of performance issues with that building. So I think that's that next evolution of that research. But I really appreciate the comment, and you know, I have to agree with you. I think there's definitely different parts of the climates that we have to take into account, and vegetation that would be used there. Thank you.
I did have the Hawaii Energy Lab as one of my examples. So yeah, there are definitely, like, I grew up in Dallas, Texas, so I'm very aware that weather is not always the thing that you want to bring into your building. Right. And we sort of, I went to architecture school in Austin, so we were very indoctrinated with the idea that the sun is not necessarily your friend, and that if you're going to bring it into the building, you need to be careful about how you do that, and that there are different architectural responses to hot, humid than for hot, arid, and temperate and cold. But again, I'd say hop onto the Living Building Challenge website, because part of the requirements for certification is that every building put a very detailed case study onto the website. So all of the data on Hawaii and any of the other buildings that are going, I know Mexico has a few going at the moment as well, all of that will be there.
I'm involved in a couple of, just on that matter about encouraging more urban greening and green roofs, walls, facades. There's a couple of initiatives. The Green Cities Fund is a research-based fund that's paid by horticulture industry levies that encourages research into more greening in Australia. So there's always any research concept that might be related to urban greening fit under that fund, and that's a co-investment type model. The Urban Forest Fund in the City of Melbourne will pay up to $500,000 for greening on private land if it meets their criteria. So it's starting to be a little bit more in terms of financial incentives to sort of offset some of the cost that is associated with this stuff. And over time, I think we'll see more of that.
It's a really interesting topic. As an architect, you often start out in concept stages with a lot of green on your buildings, and it's one of the first things that gets value managed out. So I guess I've got a question for Luke, also being an architect. What do you see as our role as architects to overcoming some of the barriers to risk and cost and maintenance of green roofs and green and facades?
So thank God I'm an engineer. I don't have to answer that question. So I think part of that is we have to understand a little bit more all those functional side of things in terms of thermal mass of the roof, rather than it's really not about that much insulation, but more about the thermal mass on the roof, the benefit of that. Try to quantify it. I don't know whether there are actually software out there today. You can model a tree's benefit in terms of health and energy and bring that into the discussion. But at the end of the day, the easiest thing is not necessarily the data. You just need this beautiful, beautiful story that makes these guys or girls fall in love with you. Then you said.
I agree.
We're talking about a green walls, roofs, things really relating to people. But in a lot of the world, we have, residential buildings with, parking structures below them and things like that. And to what extent do you see the compatibility of these green screens working well with screening of the parking components? Is that inherently a good thing, or do you see any challenges or problems from the code or even a technical viability? Or is that given the environment that the car park provides, is that going to really help, or is there something incompatible?
I'm not that familiar with what the benefits are on it. If I were to look at it purely from the building construction itself, there's always a lot of voids between floors. So there's more openness there. There's not a continuity of the building material that's there. So if you just look at it in that black and white, I don't see there being any negatives to it. As far as all of the other positive benefits, like I had said, cleaning up carbon dioxide, even catching dust and particles that are in there, I think the greenery will help in that way for the environment, for people that are around that structure in the positive way, health-wise. So I don't know if there's more that you could add from the bio side of it.
I mean, just from a pure visual amenity, we spend a lot of design effort trying to come up with decorative screens to hide the cars behind, and just, plants, given that they have that additional contribution to make in terms of carbon sequestration and air filtering and stuff, seems quite a good fit.
Yeah, we actually did a project, National Capitol Crossing in Washington, D.C. in U.S. that actually utilized a green wall to clean up the exhaust. It's quantifiable. I don't have the number, but I can send you the paper how effective that wall is in terms of cleaning up formaldehyde, VOC, PM10, and a few other contaminants. And also then there's another project we did, the New York City Emergency Call Center, which has potential cut off by all the utilities because of the nature of the building, still have to operate. So we actually have a green wall in there, but the green wall decouple the water and the air stream, so you don't have the moist carry from the water to the air, to provide some emergency oxygen and air filtering for the call center, and those are quantifiable too, so we can send those data. I mean, exchange card later.